Max was barely out of his truck when he noticed something unusual. The sound of kids laughing and chattering filled the air, but what caught his attention was their strange behavior. A group of neighborhood kids, maybe 6 or 7 of them, had gathered near the fence separating his yard from Ethan's. They were digging small holes, planting spoons like flags in the dirt, and whispering among themselves. It wasn't their usual carefree play. No, they seemed almost secretive, sneaking glances back and forth between Max's backyard and Ethan's. Max approached slowly, feeling the fatigue from his long trip dissipate, replaced by an uneasy curiosity. His week-long business trip had already left him a little disconnected from home, but this was something else. The kids didn't even notice him at first, they were too absorbed in their game. As he got closer, he overheard snippets of their conversation. Weird stuff at night. Saw someone sneaking. Her and Mr. Ethan. Max's heart skipped a beat. He tried to keep calm, but his mind was already racing. Could it be? No, Camille wouldn't, would she? Hey, what are you kids up to? He called out, his voice a bit too loud, betraying the tension inside him. The kids froze, wide-eyed, and one of them, a boy holding a shovel, blurted out, We're just playing treasure hunt, Mr. Max. But the nervous way they shuffled their feet, and the way their eyes darted between the yards, told him there was more to it. Max squinted, peering past the kids toward Ethan's house. Something wasn't right, and those innocent voices had just planted a seed of doubt that would soon unravel everything. Max tried to brush off the gnawing feeling in his gut, convincing himself it was nothing. Kids have wild imaginations, right? But the longer he stood there, the more their strange behavior stuck with him. He watched them for a moment longer, noting how they avoided looking him in the eye, how they shuffled nervously when he asked simple questions. They were hiding something, he could feel it in the air. Treasure hunt, huh? Max forced a smile, trying to sound casual, but his mind was working overtime. You find anything interesting? The kids exchanged glances, clearly unsure of how to respond. One of the older boys, probably around 10, cleared his throat. Not yet, Mr. Max, but we're getting close. Max's smile faltered. There was no treasure buried in his yard, and he knew it. But something about the way the boy said it made his skin crawl. Getting close to what? You kids see anything weird while you've been playing out here? He tried to keep his tone light, like he was just making small talk, but inside, his pulse was speeding up. The boy hesitated, his face turning slightly pale. Another one of the kids, a girl with pigtails, elbowed him sharply in the ribs. He winced and muttered, just shadows, Mr. Max. You know, sometimes we see people moving around at night. So heart was in his throat now. People moving around at night? He looked past them again, toward the fence that separated his backyard from Ethan's. The fence had always felt like more of a boundary marker than a real divider. It wasn't tall enough to provide real privacy, and you could see through the gaps easily. A dark patch of dirt along the fence caught his eye, as though someone had been walking back and forth over the same spot, again and again. What kind of shadows? Max asked, his voice dropping a little, betraying his suspicion. From my house? Or Ethan's? The boy looked at the girl for help, but she shook her head fiercely. The tension between them was so obvious now, Max wondered how he hadn't noticed it sooner. Both, I guess, the boy finally said, his voice barely more than a whisper. Max felt a knot tighten in his stomach. He'd left Camille at home for a week while he was away on business, trusting her, never doubting her loyalty. They'd been together for years, weathered storms that should have torn them apart. But this creeping suspicion was something new. He swallowed hard, trying to push it down, but the seed had already been planted. He gave the kids a tight smile, feeling suddenly out of place in his own yard. All right, well, don't stay out too late. Okay? It's getting dark. They mumbled their goodbyes and scattered quickly, leaving behind their shovels and spoons. Max stood there for a moment longer, staring at the spot where they'd been digging, the gears in his mind turning. Why would they be so interested in his backyard? Or Ethan's? He turned toward the house, but before he could take a step, a faint noise drifted over from Ethan's yard. It was quiet, almost imperceptible, like a creak or a whisper. Max froze, listening closely. The kids were gone, but something was still there. Slowly, he made his way to the fence, heart pounding in his chest. The hairs on the back of his neck stood up as he peered through the wooden slats. At first he saw nothing but the darkening sky and the neatly trimmed grass. But then, in the dim light of dusk, something caught his eye, a faint movement near Ethan's back door. A shadow, two shadows. One of them looked eerily familiar, too familiar. Max's breath caught in his throat as he watched, his worst fears slowly coming into focus. Camille's figure stepped into view, standing too close, way too close to Ethan. They were laughing softly, their bodies leaning toward each other, intimate in a way that made Max's blood boil. The knot in his stomach exploded into raw anger, and before he could stop himself, he stormed toward the fence, fists clenched, ready to tear down whatever remained of his trust. Max's legs moved faster than his mind could catch up. He crossed his yard in long, purposeful strides, feeling the anger surge through him like a tidal wave. His fists were clenched so tight his knuckles turned white, and with each step, the images of Camille and Ethan, standing too close in the dusk, replayed over and over in his head, stoking the fire inside him. What the hell was going on? Was this some misunderstanding? Were they just talking? Laughing? Max had known Ethan for years. Sure, there was a bit too friendly sometimes, but they were neighbors, friends even. Camille always said he was harmless. But as Max drew closer to the fence, doubt took over, drowning out every rational thought. The voices on the other side of the fence grew clearer. Camille's soft laughter floated toward him, followed by Ethan's low, rumbling voice. The sound of it made Max's skin crawl. It was the kind of laugh she used to give him, playful, teasing, full of affection. And now she was giving it to Ethan. Max stopped at the fence, his hand resting on the wood as he peered through a small gap between the slats. He could see them more clearly now, illuminated by the faint glow of Ethan's patio lights. Camille was leaning against the back of a lawn chair, her body angled toward Ethan, who stood just inches away, casually sipping a beer. His hand brushed her arm lightly, a touch that could have been innocent, but in the growing darkness, it felt like a slap to Max's face. The world slowed down, narrowing into this single moment. Max's breath caught in his throat. He watched as Camille reached out, her fingers lightly grazing Ethan's chest as she said something Max couldn't hear. Ethan smiled, leaning closer, too close. That was it. Max couldn't stand another second of this. Without thinking, he rounded the fence and stormed into Ethan's backyard, his heart hammering in his chest. The grass crunched under his boots as he approached, and in the distance he could hear the faint chirping of crickets. The scene in front of him felt surreal, like something out of a nightmare. Camille. Max's voice cut through the stillness like a blade, sharp and cold. Camille and Ethan both jumped, startled by his sudden appearance. Camille's eyes widened in shock as she turned toward him, her face pale in the fading light. Ethan froze, his beer halfway to his lips, looking like a deer caught in headlights. "Max, what are you doing here?" Camille stammered, her voice trembling slightly. Max ignored her question, his eyes locked onto Ethan. "What the hell is going on here?" Ethan stepped back, raising his hands defensively. "Who, Max, man, relax. We're just..." "Just what?" Max snapped, his voice laced with venom. He stepped closer, his fists still clenched at his sides. "Just hanging out. Just cozying up to my wife in the dark while I'm gone." Camille stepped between them, her hands outstretched, as if trying to diffuse the tension. "Max, calm down. This isn't what it looks like." Max laughed bitterly. "Isn't it? Then why the hell are you out here with him like this? And don't lie to me, Camille. I've had enough of that already." Ethan tried to intervene again, his voice steady but nervous. "Look, Max, it's nothing, man. We were just talking." Max shot him a look so full of rage that Ethan immediately shut his mouth. "You stay out of this," Max growled. "This is between me and my wife." Camille took a deep breath, her eyes pleading. "Max, I swear it's nothing. We were just talking. Ethan's been helping me with the yard, that's all." "So the yard?" Max's voice rose, incredulous. "At night? After I've been gone for a week? So what kind of fool do you think I am?" For a moment, no one spoke. The tension hung thick in the air, suffocating. Camille's eyes darted from Max to Ethan, desperation creeping into her expression. Max, breathing heavily, could feel the last shreds of his patience slipping away. The betrayal he feared was written all over their faces, whether they admitted it or not. "I don't want excuses," Max finally said, his voice low and deadly. "I want the truth. Right now, too." Camille's eyes flickered with panic, but she stayed silent for a moment, her lips trembling. Max could see her mind working, scrambling for an explanation, something that might calm the storm brewing inside him. But he wasn't having it. Not tonight. "The truth, Camille." Max's voice boomed across the yard, cutting through the tension like a whip. He took a step closer, his fist still clenched, every muscle in his body ready to explode. "Well, don't stand there and try to make me believe this is just friendly chat. What the hell is going on between you two?" Ethan, who had been shifting awkwardly on his feet, decided to chime in. "Max, look, man, I think you're overreacting. I know how this looks, but seriously, nothing's going on. We're just neighbors, okay? I swear." Max snapped. He lunged at Ethan, grabbing him by the collar of his shirt, and pulling him forward, his face just inches from Ethan's. "I don't want to hear another damn word from you," Max growled through gritted teeth. "You've been in my house, drinking my beer, pretending to be my friend, while all this time." Camille rushed forward, her hands on Max's arm, trying to pull him away from Ethan. "Max, stop, please," she begged, her voice cracking. "It's not what you think." Max turned his head toward her, his eyes burning with anger. "Then tell me what it is, Camille. Because right now all I see is my wife sneaking around with the neighbor like I'm some kind of idiot." She shook her head, tears welling in her eyes. "It's not like that. I promise you, Max, nothing's happened. I was lonely, okay? You've been gone so much lately with your trips, with everything. And Ethan was just there." Max's grip on Ethan loosened slightly, but the anger didn't fade. "Lonely," he repeated bitterly. "So you just run to the neighbor. Is that your excuse? You think that's going to make this better?" Camille's voice broke as she pleaded. "I didn't mean for it to go this far, Max. We were just talking. That's all it ever was, I swear." Max let go of Ethan, shoving him backward. Ethan stumbled, catching his balance, but wisely said nothing. Max took a step back, running a hand through his hair, trying to process everything. The anger, the betrayal, the confusion, it was all swirling inside him like a storm that wouldn't calm. "I trusted you," Max said quietly, his voice thick with emotion. "I trusted you, Camille. And now I come home to this?" Camille wiped at her tears, shaking her head. "Max, I know it looks bad, but it never got physical. I swear to you, I needed someone to talk to, and Ethan." Max cut her off with a sharp laugh, the bitterness clear in his tone. "Talk? Is that all it was?" "Because it sure as hell looked like more than that." He gestured wildly toward Ethan, who stood there, silent and pale. "You don't get it," Camille said softly, her voice barely a whisper. "It wasn't about him, Max. It was about us." "And?" Max stared at her, the words hitting him like a punch to the gut. "Yous?" he repeated. "You mean me being gone all the time? Is that your excuse for sneaking around behind my back?" She stepped closer, her eyes pleading. "No, it's not an excuse. But Max, we've been drifting apart for months. You're always away, always working. And I've been here by myself trying to hold it together, but I didn't know how to tell you." Max's hands trembled, the weight of her words sinking in. He knew their marriage hadn't been perfect lately, but this was how she chose to handle it, by confiding in the neighbor instead of talking to him. "You should have told me, Camille," Max whispered, his voice raw with pain. "You should have told me before it got to this." "I know," she admitted, tears streaming down her face now. "I was scared. I didn't want to lose you, Max." Max looked at her, his heart torn between the love he once felt and the betrayal that now burned inside him. He shook his head slowly, stepping back from her. "It's too late for that." Max's words hung in the air, cold and final. Camille's face twisted in agony, her tears flowing freely now, but Max couldn't find it in himself to care. The betrayal was too deep. He had spent years of his life with this woman, believing they were a team, a unit. He had sacrificed time, energy, and love into building a life together. And now, it was unraveling right in front of him. For a long moment, no one spoke. Camille stood there, shaking, trying to catch her breath between sobs, while Ethan lingered awkwardly by the fence, his hand still raised as if expecting Max to lash out again. But Max's rage had given way to something worse: emptiness. A deep, hollow pit in his chest where love and trust used to live. "I was gone for work," Max began, his voice low but steady. "Not out chasing other women, not looking for a way out. I was out there every day, busting my ass to make sure you had everything you ever wanted. A nice house, money in the bank, security." He let out a bitter laugh. "And this is what I get in return. You run to the neighbor because I wasn't around enough. That's your excuse?" Camille shook her head, still sobbing. "Max, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean for this to happen. I never wanted to hurt you. I love you." Max felt those words cut through him like a knife. "I love you." How could she say that now? After everything he'd seen, after all the secrets she had clearly been hiding. Love wasn't supposed to feel like this. It wasn't supposed to come with this much pain, this much betrayal. "You don't get to say that," Max said, his voice trembling as he spoke. "Not now. Not after everything I just saw. You lost the right to say you love me when you started sneaking around, hiding this from me." Ethan, who had been silent for too long, finally tried to speak up. "Max, man, I swear." "Shut the hell up, Ethan." Max's voice cracked like a whip, and Ethan instantly backed down, retreating a few more steps. Max turned back to Camille, his eyes red with unshed tears. "How long, Camille? How long has this been going on?" She looked down at her feet, unable to meet his gaze. "Nothing ever really happened, I swear." We didn't sleep together, we didn't. I don't care if you slept with him or not, Max snapped. The fact that you're standing here, lying to my face hiding this, sneaking around with him while I was out working to keep this family together, that's what matters. Camille covered her mouth, sobbing even harder now. I didn't know how to tell you, Max. It got out of hand. I didn't plan for any of this. Max shook his head slowly, feeling the weight of everything collapse around him. That's the problem, Camille. You didn't think, you didn't care about how this would destroy me. You didn't care about us. He looked around at the life they had built together, their home. The memories, the plans for the future that now felt meaningless. It was all tainted. Every corner of their life was touched by this betrayal, and Max didn't know if he could ever come back from it. Max, Camille whimpered, stepping closer, reaching out to him. Please, we can fix this. We can. Max stepped back, shaking his head. No, you don't fix something like this, you broke it. The silence that followed was suffocating. Camille stood there, tears streaming down her face, her arms dropping uselessly to her sides as she realized what was happening. Max had always been the strong one, the steady one. But now she saw the cracks. She saw the man she loved slipping away, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. Ethan, still hovering by the fence, took a cautious step forward. Maybe we should all just calm down and talk about this rationally. Max's eyes snapped to him, cold and unfeeling. Rationally? You want me to be rational when I just found out my wife's been sneaking around with the neighbor? Get the hell out of here, Ethan. Ethan opened his mouth as if to protest, but one look at Max's face, and he thought better of it. He nodded quickly, backing away toward his house, and disappeared inside, leaving Max and Camille alone in the suffocating stillness of the night. Camille reached out one last time, her voice barely a whisper. Max, please, don't go. I need you. Max stared at her, and for a moment he almost faltered. He saw the woman he'd fallen in love with so many years ago, the woman he had shared his life with. But then the image of her standing with Ethan flashed through his mind again, and all the love he had for her turned to ash. I'm done, Camille, he said quietly, his voice devoid of emotion. I can't do this anymore. With that, Max turned and walked away, leaving her standing in the darkness. Each step he took felt heavier than the last, but he didn't look back. He couldn't. There was nothing left to say, nothing left to save. As Max reached his front door, the house felt unfamiliar to him now, like it belonged to someone else. He paused for a moment, feeling the weight of everything settle over him. Then, with a deep breath, he stepped inside, shutting the door behind him. The click of the lock was the only sound, echoing through the silence, final and cold.